The day my worst enemy looked at me like I was the only person left in the world, everything I believed about hate fell apart. 48 hours earlier, if you had asked anyone at Westbridge University who disliked me the most, they would have answered Logan Carter without taking a second to think. It wasn't even a rumor anymore. It was campus history. Every debate tournament somehow ended with us arguing. Every economics lecture turned into another competition over who answered the professor's question first. Every student election meeting somehow found us standing on opposite sides of the room, trading polite smiles that fooled absolutely no one. People loved watching it. They even posted countdowns online whenever our names appeared together on a class roster, placing bets on how long it would take before one of us made a sarcastic comment. Usually, the answer was under 5 minutes. I told myself I didn't care. I was too focused on maintaining my GPA, leading my psychology research team, and surviving junior year without letting Logan get under my skin. That was the story I repeated every morning while staring at my reflection in the dorm bathroom mirror. It sounded convincing enough until I actually saw him. Logan had an irritating habit of arriving exactly when I least wanted him around. That Monday morning was no different. The campus coffee shop buzzed with students rushing between classes, laptops open, backpacks scattered across chairs, and someone quietly practicing guitar near the window. I had just picked up my iced vanilla latte when a familiar voice drifted across the room. "Careful, Brooks. I heard caffeine only helps people who already know the answers." I didn't even turn around before replying. Good thing I'm not worried. A few nearby students laughed under their breath. Logan stepped beside me, effortlessly composed in a navy varsity jacket with the debate team logo stitched over the chest. His dark hair looked unfairly perfect for 8:30 in the morning, and his expression carried that same calm confidence that somehow made every sarcastic remark sound rehearsed. "Still pretending you're unbeatable?" he asked. "Still pretending you're funny?" I answered. The barista sighed dramatically before sliding another drink onto the counter. "You two should really start charging admission." More laughter followed, exactly as expected. Logan smirked like he'd won another invisible contest before collecting his coffee and walking away without another word. That should have been the end of it. It usually was. A quick exchange. A few annoyed glances. Another story for people to gossip about during lunch. But something felt different this time. As I headed toward the science building, I noticed him several yards ahead. He paused near the crosswalk, holding the library door open for a freshman struggling with 2 oversized boxes. He smiled, said something that made the nervous student laugh, then disappeared inside before anyone else seemed to notice. It caught me completely off guard. That wasn't the Logan Carter everyone knew. Or maybe it was, and none of us had ever been paying attention. I shook the thought away before it could settle. Logan Carter wasn't my mystery to solve. He was my competition. At least, that's what I still believed as my phone buzzed with a notification from the dean's office. Mandatory meeting. Student Leadership Conference project assignments. Attendance required. I had no idea that one email was about to force the two of us into the same story, whether either of us wanted it or not. The conference room inside Westbridge University's Student Leadership Center was already half full by the time I arrived. Representatives from every major organization chatted in small groups, while faculty members sorted through stacks of folders near the front. I slipped into an empty chair along the middle row and hoped the meeting would end before lunch. That hope lasted exactly 6 seconds. Logan Carter walked in carrying a notebook and a paper cup of black coffee, scanned the room once, and somehow ended up choosing the seat directly beside mine, even though dozens of others were still empty. He settled into the chair without looking at me. "Do not get excited," he said quietly. This was the only seat with enough legroom. I stared straight ahead. "Keep telling yourself that." A professor stepped to the podium before either of us could continue. "Good morning, everyone. This year's Student Leadership Conference will be different. Instead of competing individually, you will complete a campus improvement project in assigned pairs. Your presentations will represent the university at the national conference this spring." A low wave of conversation swept through the room. I barely listened until the professor began reading names. My attention returned the moment I heard my own. Ethan Brooks. I looked up, paired with Logan Carter. The room exploded with laughter, whispers, and more than one dramatic gasp. Someone near the back actually muttered, "There is no way this survives until Friday." Logan slowly turned toward me with an expression that looked just as unimpressed as mine probably did. Well, he sighed. This should be a spectacular disaster. For you, maybe, I replied. The professor raised one hand for silence. Your grades, scholarships, and conference eligibility will depend on this partnership. Pair changes will not be approved. Just like that, every possible escape disappeared. The meeting ended 20 minutes later, and students flooded into the hallway discussing ideas for their projects. Logan and I stood awkwardly outside the conference room, neither of us speaking first. Finally, he glanced at his watch. Library. 6 o'clock tonight. I folded my arms. You are assuming I am free. No, he answered calmly. I am assuming you care too much about your academic record to skip the meeting. I hated that he was probably right. Fine. 6 o'clock. Without another word, he walked away toward the debate building. I watched him disappear into the afternoon crowd before realizing I had been standing there longer than necessary. By 6 o'clock, the library's collaborative study floor buzzed with quiet conversations and the soft tapping of keyboards. Logan already occupied a corner table covered with notebooks, color-coded folders, and 2 printed copies of the project guidelines. One of them slid across the table toward me before I even sat down. I highlighted the important sections, he said. That sounds dangerously helpful coming from you. Do not worry. I still disagree with at least half of your ideas, and you have not even shared them yet. Against my better judgment, I laughed. It escaped before I could stop it. Logan blinked once, almost surprised, and the corner of his mouth lifted into the smallest smile before disappearing just as quickly. For the next 2 hours, we debated research methods, surveyed campus improvement proposals, and challenged nearly every suggestion the other person made. It should have been exhausting. Instead, the conversation flowed with an unexpected rhythm, like 2 people solving the same puzzle from opposite sides. As we packed our bags, my notebooks slipped from the table and scattered pages across the floor. Before I could reach them, Logan was already kneeling to gather every sheet in careful order. He handed them back without a single sarcastic comment. You should probably keep these, he said. Your best ideas are in there. Then he walked away before I could decide whether that had been another insult or the first genuine compliment he had ever given me. The rest of the week settled into a routine that made absolutely no sense. Every afternoon at 6 o'clock, Logan and I met in the same corner of the library. Every meeting began with at least one sarcastic remark, continued with spirited debates over research data, and somehow ended with our project making more progress than any other team on campus. It was becoming increasingly difficult to convince myself that I hated working with him. That realization alone was enough to make me uncomfortable. On Thursday morning, Professor Reynolds surprised our class with an unannounced quiz worth 10% of the semester grade. Groans filled the lecture hall while everyone scrambled for pencils and calculators. I reached into my backpack, only to realize my favorite mechanical pencil was missing. Before I could panic, another pencil quietly slid across my desk. I looked sideways. Logan kept his eyes on the front of the room. Return it later, he said flatly. You are distracting me. I accepted it without another word, telling myself he simply wanted the class to start on time. After the quiz ended, he left before I could hand it back. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the student center to print survey forms for our campus improvement proposal. The printer jammed halfway through the stack, swallowing the last 20 pages. I sighed, already imagining another delay, until the student employee behind the desk smiled. Your partner already paid for another set this morning, she said. He said you would probably need extras. My partner? I asked. Logan Carter. She pointed toward the receipt clipped beside the printer. He left about an hour ago. I folded the fresh copies under my arm, completely unsure what to think. Logan never mentioned stopping by. He certainly never asked me to pay him back. That evening, our meeting stretched well past sunset. Rain tapped softly against the library windows while most students packed up and headed home. I rubbed my eyes after staring at spreadsheets for nearly 3 hours. We can finish the budget tomorrow, I muttered. You look exhausted, Logan observed without looking away from his laptop. That is because I am. Then stop pretending you are a machine. He closed his computer and stood. Come on. I frowned. Come where? The vending machines downstairs have the only hot chocolate on campus that actually tastes like chocolate. That sounds suspiciously specific. I have done the research. 5 minutes later, We stood in the nearly empty student lounge, paper cups warming our hands while rain blurred the lights outside. The silence should have felt awkward. Instead, it settled naturally between us. Logan stared out the window for a moment before speaking. Do you know why everyone thinks we hate each other? I shrugged. Because we do a convincing job. He laughed quietly. It was softer than I expected, almost tired. Maybe people only notice the loud moments. Before I could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening for just a second before he slipped the device back into his pocket. Everything okay? I asked without thinking. Logan looked at me with an unreadable expression, as though the question itself had caught him off guard. Then he nodded once. It will be. The answer felt incomplete, but I let it go. As we walked across campus beneath one oversized umbrella he insisted on carrying because, according to him, I walked too slowly to avoid getting soaked, I noticed something that refused to leave my mind. Every time another student greeted me along the sidewalk, Logan instinctively stepped aside, giving me space to talk. Yet every single time I turned back toward him, his attention was already on me, quiet and unwavering, disappearing the instant our eyes met, almost as if he hoped I would never notice he had been looking in the first place. By the following Monday, our project had quietly become the most organized one in the entire program. At least that was what Professor Reynolds announced before dismissing class, adding that the faculty wanted to review our preliminary presentation 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The compliment should have felt satisfying. Instead, it filled me with a strange awareness that Logan and I were spending more time together than either of us had ever planned. Our schedules somehow synchronized without discussion. If one of us arrived at the library first, the other appeared within minutes. If I forgot to bring reference books, Logan had already borrowed them. If he needed updated survey statistics, I had already compiled them before he asked. It was becoming almost effortless, and that realization bothered me far more than another argument ever could. Do not look so disturbed, Logan said one evening while adjusting several printed charts across the study table. People might think you enjoy working with me. I looked up from my laptop. I was thinking exactly the same thing about you. That is unfortunate. Very. Neither of us smiled immediately, but a second later we both did anyway. The moment disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Across the library, someone called Logan's name. A senior from the debate team waved him over, holding several folders under one arm. Give me 1 minute, Logan said before walking away. I returned to organizing our presentation slides, only half paying attention to the conversation happening several yards away. Then a familiar sentence drifted across the quiet room. You know everyone thinks you and Brooks cannot stand each other. Another voice laughed. At least that rivalry makes debate season interesting. I waited for Logan to agree. It would have been the easiest response. Instead, his answer came after a noticeable pause. People believe what they want to believe. There was something unusually calm about the way he said it. No sarcasm. No joke. Just a simple sentence that somehow lingered in my thoughts long after the conversation ended. When he returned to the table, he acted as though nothing had happened. We spent another hour refining our proposal until the library announced closing time. As we packed our bags, I realized one of my folders was missing. Panic flickered through me. Weeks of handwritten notes had vanished. What happened? Logan asked immediately. My research folder. I searched beneath the table, inside my backpack, even between the shelves nearby. Nothing. Logan quietly set his own bag down and began retracing every place we had worked that evening without a single complaint. Nearly 20 minutes later, a student employee emerged from the front desk, holding a blue folder. Someone turned this in about 10 minutes ago. Relief washed over me so quickly that I almost laughed. Thank you, I said, reaching for it. The employee smiled. You should thank your friend. He noticed it was missing before anyone else did. I glanced toward Logan. He simply shrugged. Your notes are more organized than mine. It would have been inconvenient to start over. That explanation sounded perfectly reasonable until I opened the folder while walking outside. Tucked between my research pages was a small yellow sticky note written in neat handwriting. Remember to eat before tomorrow's presentation rehearsal. You skipped lunch again today. There was no signature, but I did not need one. I looked up instinctively. Logan was already several steps ahead beneath the campus lights, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, pretending not to notice that I had stopped walking. For the first time since this impossible partnership began, a quiet question settled into the back of my mind. What if I had misunderstood him from the very beginning? The question refused to leave me alone. I carried it through classes, through meetings, even through my morning run around the campus track. Every sarcastic comment Logan had ever made suddenly came with an invisible question mark attached to it. Had he really been trying to embarrass me all those years? Or had I simply accepted the version of him everyone else believed? I hated that my brain kept searching for answers instead of preparing for our presentation. Tuesday afternoon brought another rehearsal in the auditorium where each team had exactly 20 minutes to present before receiving faculty feedback. Logan arrived carrying our presentation remote, 2 bottles of water, and a folder I was certain I had left in my apartment. "You forgot this on your desk yesterday," he said, placing it beside my laptop. I frowned. "How did you know where I live?" "Student Leadership Directory." His answer came too quickly. "Everyone on the executive committee has access." It sounded reasonable, yet something about the way he immediately changed the subject made me wonder if there was more to the story. During rehearsal, our timing was nearly perfect. Logan anticipated every transition without interrupting me, and somehow we never spoke over each other. Professor Reynolds leaned back with folded arms after we finished. "Excellent work," he said. "You two argue less than you used to." Logan glanced toward me. "We are saving it for the judges." The room laughed, and for the first time I noticed that his jokes no longer felt sharp enough to wound. They felt familiar instead. After rehearsal ended, several classmates invited me to grab dinner at the student union. I accepted before realizing Logan was quietly packing our materials alone. "You can come too," I heard myself saying. He looked genuinely surprised. "I thought your friends preferred not having me around." "They will survive one meal." A small smile crossed his face. "Maybe another time. My sister is calling tonight." He lifted his phone slightly before walking toward the exit. That single sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. Until then, I had known almost nothing about Logan outside classrooms and competitions. He had a family, someone waiting for his call, a life that existed beyond the version I had built inside my head. 2 days later, while returning borrowed books to the library, I accidentally turned down the wrong aisle. Logan stood near the history shelves with an older woman whose silver hair was tied neatly beneath a baseball cap. She laughed as he carefully adjusted the stack of books in her arms, teasing him about something I could not hear. The expression on his face stopped me where I stood. It was warm, relaxed, completely unguarded. Nothing like the confident rival the rest of campus knew. Before I could step away unnoticed, the woman looked in my direction and smiled. "You must be Ethan," she called cheerfully. Logan turned so quickly that one of the books nearly slipped from his hands. "Grandma," he said quietly, sounding more embarrassed than I had ever seen him. "This is Ethan Brooks. We are working on the leadership project together." His grandmother's eyes brightened. "So you are the young man he keeps talking about." Silence landed between us. My heartbeat stumbled. Logan cleared his throat almost immediately. "She exaggerates." "I absolutely do not," she replied with a knowing grin. "Every phone call somehow includes your name." Logan looked at the floor for half a second before gently guiding her toward the checkout desk with the unmistakable determination of someone trying to end a conversation before it revealed too much. I remained frozen beside the bookshelf, replaying one sentence over and over in my mind. Every phone call somehow includes your name. For someone who supposedly could not stand me, Logan seemed to spend an awful lot of time thinking about me when I was not around. After that afternoon in the library, I started noticing things I should have seen years ago. Not dramatic moments, not grand gestures, tiny details that somehow carried more weight than anything either of us had ever said. Logan always knew which seat I preferred during meetings and somehow arrived early enough to save it without making it obvious. He always brought an extra charger because, according to him, I had an impressive talent for showing up with a laptop battery under 20%. Every time our group meetings ran through lunch, there was mysteriously an extra turkey sandwich sitting beside my notebook before I even realized I was hungry. If I thanked him, he always shrugged it off with the same answer. I was buying one anyway. It was becoming increasingly difficult to believe every coincidence was actually a coincidence. 3 days before the regional presentation, Professor Reynolds asked every team to submit their final rehearsal videos for evaluation. Logan volunteered to upload ours while I met with another faculty advisor across campus. By the time I returned to the communications building that evening, the media lab was almost empty. Only one computer screen still glowed in the corner. Logan had apparently forgotten to sign out before leaving. I walked over intending to shut everything down for him. That was when I noticed an open folder on the desktop labeled Leadership Project Drafts. I clicked it without thinking, expecting presentation files. Instead, dozens of photographs filled the screen. They were all of me. Me laughing with classmates outside the student union. Me carrying too many library books. Me cheering during freshman orientation. Me asleep in the campus shuttle with a textbook balanced on my chest. None of them looked staged. They looked like moments someone had quietly noticed while everyone else kept walking. My pulse stumbled. Beneath the photo folder sat another document, simply titled Notes. Curiosity won before common sense could stop me. The file opened to a list that stretched across several pages. Ethan prefers vanilla coffee after morning classes. Ethan skips lunch whenever research deadlines get close. Ethan always pretends he is fine when he is overwhelmed. Remind him to take breaks, even if he complains. He smiles more when people ask about psychology than when they compliment his grades. The words blurred together as I continued reading. There were no jokes, no insults, no evidence of the rivalry everyone believed existed. Only observations so careful and so personal that they could not have been written by someone who hated me. Footsteps echoed outside the lab. I closed the document so quickly that my hand almost slipped from the mouse. Logan stepped through the doorway carrying his forgotten jacket. His eyes moved from the computer screen to my face, and all the color quietly drained from his expression. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt impossibly loud. Finally, I managed to ask the only question my mind could form. How long? Logan lowered his gaze for a moment before answering. Long enough that I stopped counting. My heartbeat refused to slow. Then why spend years pretending we could barely stand each other? He let out a slow breath and leaned against the doorway as though searching for the right words. Because everyone expected us to compete, he said softly. The moment people think your biggest rival cares about you, they stop looking at your accomplishments and start looking at your feelings. I stared at him, unable to reconcile the person standing in front of me with the version I had believed for nearly 3 years. Logan offered a faint, almost apologetic smile that never quite reached his eyes. It was easier to let everyone think I disliked you, he admitted quietly. It was much harder to let anyone know how much I admired you. Neither of us spoke again that night. Logan quietly shut down the computer, picked up his jacket, and walked beside me across campus under a sky filled with slow-moving clouds that reflected the city lights. The silence between us no longer felt hostile. It felt fragile, like one careless sentence could undo everything we had accidentally begun to understand. By the next morning, the regional presentation was all anyone seemed to care about. Student organizations crowded the conference center, faculty members hurried between meeting rooms, and volunteers pinned schedules to every bulletin board they could find. Logan and I arrived early to review our slides one last time. We barely exchanged a dozen words, yet somehow every transition remained effortless. It was as though years of arguing had quietly transformed into years of learning exactly how the other person thought. Professor Reynolds smiled as we stepped off the stage after rehearsal. You two finally figured out that working together is easier than competing against each other. Logan answered with a small grin. Do not tell the rest of campus. We have a reputation to maintain. The professor laughed and walked away. I looked at Logan. Do you really still care what everyone thinks? His smile faded just enough to reveal something more honest beneath it. I used to. Before I could respond, someone called my name from across the lobby. It was Ryan Mitchell, a journalism major I had met during freshman orientation. He walked over carrying 2 iced coffees and greeted me with the same easy enthusiasm he always had. Congratulations on making the finals, Ryan said. I was hoping to catch you before everything started. He handed one of the drinks to me. Thought you could use this. You remembered my order? I asked, surprised. Vanilla, right? Ryan smiled. Some things are worth remembering. I thanked him, and we drifted into an easy conversation about classes, graduation plans, and internships. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Logan standing several feet away reviewing our presentation notes. At least that was what he appeared to be doing. Every few seconds, his attention lifted toward us before returning to the papers in his hands. He never interrupted. He never walked over. He simply grew quieter. Ryan eventually laughed and said, "There is a spring festival after the awards ceremony tonight. Would you want to go together? Nothing fancy, just food trucks, music, and one evening without talking about grades." The invitation caught me off guard. Before I could answer, Professor Reynolds announced that finalists needed to report backstage immediately. "Can I let you know afterward?" I asked. "Of course," Ryan replied with an understanding smile. "Good luck." He disappeared into the crowd just as I turned toward Logan. He had already packed our materials into his backpack. "Ready?" he asked calmly. His voice sounded exactly the same as always, but something behind his eyes had changed. During our presentation, Logan delivered every point flawlessly. The judges nodded, took notes, and even applauded when we finished. We had every reason to celebrate. Yet while students gathered outside the auditorium congratulating one another, Logan quietly stepped away from the crowd. I spotted him standing alone near the edge of the campus fountain, staring at the ripples across the water as though trying to solve a question no competition could answer. For the first time since I had met him, he looked less like the confident rival everyone admired, and more like someone trying very hard to hide the fact that he was afraid of losing something he had never believed could belong to him in the first place. The award ceremony ended with flashing cameras, applause, and more congratulations than I could process. Our project won first place, earning a standing ovation from the faculty and an invitation to represent Westbridge University at the national conference. Professor Reynolds shook both of our hands and proudly declared that we had become the strongest partnership the program had seen in years. Everyone around us smiled as though the story had reached its perfect ending. They had no idea the most important conversation had not even begun. By sunset, the annual Spring Festival had transformed the center of campus into a sea of string lights, live music, and food trucks stretching across the main lawn. Students wandered between carnival games carrying paper cups of lemonade and oversized slices of pizza, while laughter drifted through the warm evening air. Ryan spotted me almost immediately and waved from beside the Ferris wheel. "You made it," he said with an easy smile. "I was starting to think you forgot." "I said I would let you know," I answered. I try to keep my promises. We spent the next 20 minutes walking through the festival, talking about graduation, graduate school applications, and everything except competition. Ryan was kind, thoughtful, and effortlessly easy to talk to. Under different circumstances, I probably would have enjoyed the evening without overthinking every conversation. Instead, my attention kept drifting somewhere else. Every time I laughed, I found myself scanning the crowd without realizing it. Every time someone brushed past us, I caught myself searching for one familiar face. Finally, Ryan tilted his head. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Who are you looking for?" The question stopped me completely. Before I could answer, a familiar voice carried softly through the evening noise. "Ethan." I turned. Logan stood several feet away beneath a line of glowing lights, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, his usual confidence replaced by an expression I had never seen before. He looked nervous. Ryan glanced between us and smiled politely. "I think someone needs you." I nodded gratefully. "Thank you for understanding." "Go," Ryan said. "I have a feeling this conversation matters more than anything we were talking about." As Ryan disappeared into the crowd, Logan remained exactly where he was, almost as if he was giving me every opportunity to walk away. Instead, I crossed the distance between us. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Music floated from the nearby stage while students laughed somewhere behind us. The entire festival seemed to blur into the background. Logan finally broke the silence. "I have rehearsed this conversation at least 100 times." I smiled faintly. "That sounds like you." He let out a quiet laugh before looking directly into my eyes. "I told myself pretending to dislike you was the safest choice. If we kept competing, nobody would question why I noticed every little thing about you. Nobody would wonder why your opinion mattered more than anyone else's. I thought keeping my feelings hidden would protect both of us." His voice grew softer. The problem was that every year it became harder to pretend. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Logan looked away briefly before continuing. "When I saw you talking to Ryan today, I realized something. I was never afraid of losing a competition. I was afraid of losing the chance to tell you the truth." He took one careful breath. "I never hated you, Ethan. I admired you long before I understood why. Somewhere along the way, admiration became something much deeper, and I kept hiding behind a rivalry because it felt safer than risking your friendship or your respect. I do not expect you to feel the same way. I just could not keep pretending anymore. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The lights above us shimmered gently in the evening breeze while every memory from the past 3 years quietly rearranged itself inside my mind. Suddenly, every sarcastic remark, every thoughtful gesture, every silent act of kindness finally made perfect sense. For a moment, I could not find a single word. The music from the festival faded into little more than a distant rhythm while Logan stood in front of me, wearing none of the confidence that had made him famous across campus. The captain of the debate team, who could dismantle any argument in minutes, suddenly looked like someone hoping the world would be kind for just one evening. I let out a slow breath and smiled before I even realized I was doing it. "You know," I said quietly, "you spent 3 years convincing everyone that you could not stand me." Logan gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "I was unfortunately very committed to the performance. You definitely deserved an award for it." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I know." I stepped a little closer. "The problem is that you forgot one thing." His expression softened. "What did I forget?" "You were so busy pretending that you never noticed I started looking forward to every argument." Logan blinked. I continued before my courage disappeared. "At first I wanted to beat you. Then I wanted to understand you. Somewhere along the way, I stopped counting victories because the best part of my day became knowing you would be there." His eyes searched mine as though making sure he had heard correctly. "Does that mean?" I nodded gently. "It means you were not the only one hiding behind a rivalry." A quiet laugh escaped both of us at exactly the same time, dissolving years of unnecessary distance in a single shared moment. Around us, the festival continued exactly as before. Students cheered near the game booths. Music drifted across the lawn. Somewhere a child laughed after winning an oversized stuffed bear. The world had not changed at all, yet somehow everything felt different. Logan looked toward the lights hanging above the walkway before returning his attention to me. "Can we try something completely new?" he asked. "What is that?" "Being honest." I smiled. "I think we have earned that." From that evening forward, the campus discovered that the two students everyone had called lifelong rivals suddenly stopped arguing in crowded hallways. Instead, they were usually seen walking to class together, sharing coffee before morning lectures, and quietly editing each other's presentations in the library until closing time. Naturally, the rumors spread even faster than before. Some classmates insisted the rivalry had simply become less dramatic. Others claimed they had predicted everything from the beginning. Professor Reynolds only smiled every time he saw us and said that the strongest partnerships were often built by people willing to challenge each other first. Ryan congratulated both of us with complete sincerity and joked that he had recognized the ending long before either of us had. Even Logan's grandmother greeted me with a warm hug the next time we met at the library and whispered that she had been waiting months for her grandson to stop overthinking everything. Nearly 1 year later, graduation arrived beneath bright blue skies and rows of white folding chairs stretching across the football field. Families filled the stadium while cameras flashed from every direction. As we waited for the ceremony to begin, Logan stood beside me wearing the same calm smile that no longer felt distant. "Do you ever regret those years we wasted pretending?" he asked. I thought about every sarcastic exchange, every hidden act of kindness, every misunderstanding that had somehow guided us here. Then I shook my head. "No," I answered honestly, "because every step led us to this one." Logan smiled in the quiet way I had come to know so well, and together we walked across the graduation stage not as the university's most famous rivals, but as two people who had finally discovered that the opposite of love had never been hate. It had simply been fear, and once we let that fear go, the future waiting ahead of us felt brighter than either of us had ever imagined.